Thank God you're here. Today we are in Assisans Cemetery, which is a place that may be horrifying to some Americans, but Danes think it's quite normal to come here, go for a walk, even have a picnic. And that brings us to the subject of today's video. So we've talked to you before on this channel about things that are normal to Danes but would be horrifying to Americans. But we decided to flip it around and talk about the things that are totally normal in America that would be horrifying to Danes. Let's get started.
Now, one of the things that Danes may find horrifying if they came to the States would be the gun culture. And we want to preface this by saying that it doesn't mean that guns are inherently bad. We have family members that are avid gun owners, avid hunters, very responsible with guns. We've shot guns ourselves. But the culture is completely different. I mean, in Denmark, it's very rare to hear about shootings, especially mass shootings, which virtually never happen. But at the same time, there are guns in Denmark. I mean, police officers wear guns. But it doesn't happen in common conversation where people casually talk about guns as a hobby that they have. Not really a thing here in Denmark. And the casualness about it is something that it would probably horrify Danes if they came to live in the States.
And I think when we talk with our friends about the gun culture or these kinds of issues in the United States, the thing that horrifies Danes the most is just the inaction. So the idea that there can be mass shootings month after month in schools and shopping malls and movie theaters, and nothing gets done politically to make it any safer. So the gun violence culture, I think, is what would horrify Danes the most. Not necessarily hunting and sport and things like that. I think they're okay with, but just the fact that nothing has been done and there have continued to be so many mass shootings in the United States is pretty horrifying to Danes and most Europeans. Okay, and another thing that is completely normal in America, but would really be horrifying to Danes, is just how freely and openly people talk about their religious beliefs and push them on other people. And I think that last part is the kicker. See, in Denmark, it's not only a more secular country, but religion is viewed as a very private matter. It's something that you should maybe talk about in your home, but definitely not in the public or political sphere as is done in America. And this is especially funny because Denmark actually has a state religion of Christianity, and America is the country where the separation of church and state exists in the political laws. But it wouldn't be that way if you actually looked at the two countries and how they handle religion.
Yeah, and there's a bit of a history behind this. I mean, let's remember that so many people that came to the U.S. during the big waves of immigration were coming for religious freedom from the state religions of Europe. And so that means that you have a much more diverse set of religions, even within Christianity itself, and much more of a culture of self-promotion, as different sects within the U.S. would try to gain membership through evangelical approaches. So there's always been a much more open and kind of very expected conversation around religion. I mean, even growing up, it was really common for people to say, oh, what church do you go to? Or which religion are you? Even conversations to have in school. The sort of thing that you just don't hear here at all, because either one, it's assumed that everybody is either in the Danish church or doesn't care at all, or nobody really cares and wants to intrude on that piece of privacy.
Exactly. So just remember that all of the religious radicals got pushed out of Europe and landed in the United States. So that's maybe why we're a little bit horrifying to Danes when it comes to religion.
Another thing that Danes would find horrifying in the U.S. is the difference in how policing is handled. Now, obviously, this is one that's been in the news quite a bit the last few years with different incidents happening in the U.S. But even beyond this on a personal level, we've noticed a very big difference between the way that we experience life with police here in Denmark versus how it was back in the U.S. I mean, back in the U.S., we had multiple cases where, say we were sitting in a park and there was a little piece of a bottle of a wine showing that we would have somebody come over and tell us you can't drink that in here. Those sorts of things, for one, the rules are different here in Denmark, but in general, I don't think I've spoken to a single police officer once in 4 years here.
Yeah, it's much more a feeling of they're here only when you need them and only if you call them to protect and serve, I guess, and not so much to enforce or crack down on things. So it's a bit of a different feeling. We can go months without seeing police officers in Denmark, and they're also much more young and fit and able and deployed less frequently because there's a lot of other methods used where you have mobile social work units and they get dispatched to certain incidents in the city. So speed and speed stops on the highway don't really occur because that's all done by machines. So there's less encounters with police overall, which ends up being a better thing, and you have less of these horrific incidents happening. And Danes would be horrified by the way that policing is handled in the US. It seems much more over-policed after living in Denmark for a while. And although police in Denmark do carry firearms, they're deployed much less. In fact, there have only been 7 police-related shootings that have resulted in a death in Denmark since 2010. And we all know that those numbers are a bit different in the United States. Police training is a bit more involved in Denmark too, where it takes between 3 to 4 years to become a police officer in Denmark, and the training program in the United States varies from municipality to municipality, but it's generally about 6 months on average. So police are a little more trained and less frequently used in Denmark, which makes the policing situation very different, and that in America, which would be a bit horrifying to Danes. And another thing that would be horrifying to Danes, but it's pretty normal in the US, is something we've talked about a few times on our channel before, and that is wearing shoes in the house. And I know that a lot of you guys who are Danish and watching this were horrified in the comments when we told you that it's not mandatory to take your shoes off at every American's house. And I didn't grow up in a shoes off household. You did, right? I feel like we take our shoes off at your parents' house.
A little bit more, but it wouldn't be uncommon to come in from outside unless your shoes were all wet and muddy or something like that, and wear shoes in the kitchen, maybe not on the carpet upstairs.
Yeah, so it's definitely not like in Denmark where you have to take your shoes off when you enter. In America, I'd say a lot of people have shoes off houses and shoes on houses, and it never hurts to ask, but it's definitely not the rule that you have to take your shoes off. And that would definitely be horrifying to almost all the Danes that watch our channel.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. All the Danes that spent good money on funny socks so they can wear around when they go to house parties and things like that, wasted most of the time when you go to the US because you'll have your shoes on the whole time instead.
I think more of it is that they spend a lot of money on restoring their flooring.
Well, yes.
And they don't want to mess that up. But in any event, it would be horrifying.
We've mentioned a couple times how Danes are direct and to the point, and that goes for customer service as well. In Denmark, when you go to a restaurant, you'll almost never know what your waiter's name is, but when you go to the US, before you even hear what the specials are, you're going to have a bubbly waiter come over, tell you their name and life story before you've even had a chance to sit down and realize what you're going to eat.
Yeah, and we could do an entire video on this, and we may, but the differences between dining out or even going shopping in the US compared to Denmark is something that would probably horrify Danes. I mean, Americans get right up in your face, and it's almost pushy how much they intrude on your meal or even just your shopping experience. They essentially follow you around the store or follow you around the restaurant with a pitcher of water ready to refill your glass, like as you're having a private conversation or maybe celebrating a birthday. And in Denmark, it's very different. They kind of want you to leave them alone during a meal. And I have to admit, we've probably transitioned fully to embracing that when we go out to eat, because we don't necessarily want a waiter who's hovering over us and you know, it's much more intimate to be left alone during a meal.
Yeah, it's funny how in Denmark it's entirely common to wave a waiter down, but that would feel entirely rude in the US. And I can see this is why Danes might be a little horrified with the service there if they're waving somebody down from across the way and their waiter is going to get annoyed because they're going to come over with some more water in about 30 seconds anyways.
Yeah, a waiter would be very angry in the US if you waved them down, but it's totally normal in Denmark, which would make it horrifying in some cases to go out to eat in the US. Another thing that would horrify Danes but be completely normal in America is bragging and the need to win all the time. Americans rank #1 in confidence. Just ask them. They'll tell you. And that's something that is really at odds with the Danish mindset, which is all about equality and finding the talents and strengths in everyone. And even though Americans do pitch that, especially in school, it's very much a culture centered around promoting yourself and being the best. In fact, like and subscribe to our channel. We have almost 1 million views, and I'm just kidding. But that's something that would be very American and comes very natural. And in Denmark, it may not be totally horrifying, but it's kind of at odds with the Danish mindset.
And that's not to say that Danes aren't competitive themselves and they don't enjoy winning. Just watch them cheering for any of their football teams. Another thing that would horrify Danes if they came to the US is going to be healthcare costs. In Denmark, it's well known that we pay high taxes, but it also means that our healthcare is essentially free. If we have to go to a doctor or a hospital, you show your yellow card and you're taken care of. In the US, not always that case. For one, insurance can be quite expensive, especially if you're working on your own. And number two is that there's a whole bunch of hidden costs that can come in. Just ask anybody who happened to go to a doctor or a hospital that was out of network from their insurance company. And on top of that, insurance is tied to your job. In the US, if you lose your job, in general, you lose your insurance. That's a major consideration why people take jobs or stay in jobs they may not even like.
Yeah, and it would definitely be horrifying to Danes. Just the fact that in America, it's very commonplace to, say, have like big public fundraisers if even just like a child in your neighborhood gets cancer, and you have to have a bunch of community fundraising for everybody to donate money to get this kid childcare. But Danes think it's much more efficient to just do it through taxes, and everybody should help each other out in that kind of way. And in America, it's just not the mentality, and it's very commonplace that you have these unfortunate situations that can bankrupt a family, and medical bankruptcy over something that you can't control is a really horrifying thing, especially to Danes. So another thing that would horrify Danes, but it's completely normal in America, is that literally everything is politicized. And it happens on the left or the right, however you want to think of it politically. But you have views that basically make everything a finite decision, left, right, one or the other, and there's no nuance in politics. And everything, again, is politicized. The police, science, global warming, everything, and things that affect everybody in society are basically taken as either pro or anti.
Yeah, and on the political correctness stance, this is something we hear our Danish friends say all the time, which is that, oh, we Danes are not nearly as politically correct as you Americans. It comes across in their humor. We've talked about how when it comes to Danish humor, intent matters sometimes much more than delivery and how things are received. So this is an area where I think Danes would be horrified that some of their casual humor they might use amongst friends or even co-workers is something that would go across pretty poorly and would horrify actually the Americans that they're working with or being friends with.
Yeah, Americans have this really not a good, in my opinion, way of basically having two sides to everything. And sometimes it just is what it is. And if it's not offensive, it shouldn't be offensive. And if it's meant to be offensive, it should be. Also, things like science, there's not really another side to it. So the idea of teaching something other than evolution, which is proven, is something that would never happen in Denmark, but is a bit horrifying that that's taught in some American schools.
Another thing that would horrify Danes when they come to the US is going to be the complete difference in public transportation. For example, in Denmark, we can take our Rejsekort and travel anywhere across the country. Bus, train, metro, even harbor ferry. All of it works on one card. It's all connected, and you can take a train anywhere pretty much and get there relatively easily.
Yeah, and I think even for Danes that travel, but especially those that move to the US, are going to be a little bit surprised that you pretty much need to take a car anywhere that you go. Even in the cities, it's definitely not as bike friendly as it is in most Danish cities where there's dedicated bike paths and bike infrastructure anywhere you go. In fact, infrastructure in general is pretty weak in the United States. We actually rank 13th globally out of all developed nations, which is not good, especially for a country that has the money to invest more in itself.
And on bikes, I can tell you, I for a while commuted in Philadelphia to the office by bike, and it was a pretty scary thing since there were a lot of streets that weren't bike dedicated and drivers just didn't know how to deal with bikes. I really felt like some mornings I was taking my life in my hands. Sorry, Mom.
So biking and just traveling around the US in general using public transportation would be horrifying to most Danes. And another thing that may not be horrifying to Danes, but would definitely be annoying in America, but it's totally normal for Americans, is the fact that the price that you pay is not normally the price that you see on an item. So the displayed price is usually not including taxes or any kind of service charge, which is actually very annoying and maybe a bit horrifying, because if you show up to a counter to pay for something and it ends up being 6% more, 10% more, oh, and also there's an expectation that you pay a 20% tip on your meal, that can be really annoying. If you go and buy something and it's listed at $5, you want to pay $5 for that. And that's almost never the case in America.
Yeah, I remember one of the first times I traveled abroad experiencing this, where I saw the price of something was like €4 in a coffee shop. And I was all ready to have extra money. I had cash so I could put down a tip, and then realized that it was really €4. That's just how it is. So something that we're totally used to, and even when we go back to the States, we have to reprogram ourselves to make sure that we have cash on hand. So if we go to a bar or a restaurant, we can pay the server a tip in cash. And it's a completely different thing that, again, like Derek said, probably not horrifying, but definitely really annoying. One more thing that would horrify Danes if they were in the US is going to be the nature of underage drinking. Now, we've had some back and forth with you guys in the comments about the actual drinking age in Denmark, but the truth is, in the US, not only is it 21 years old for you to be able to buy alcohol, if you're under 21 years old and you're drinking alcohol or possessing alcohol, you run the risk of getting a citation or even being arrested.
Yeah, and this is actually goes even farther than that, where the drinking culture is much different, and you can't even be publicly intoxicated in the United States without risking a fine. So literally, police can stop you if they just think that you're drunk. That's for any age group, by the way. But for those that aren't 21, it's definitely an idea that you can literally be breaking the law if you're underage drinking. I remember my university, and it wasn't even like a crazy conservative or like uber Christian university. It was just a normal state school in Pennsylvania. We had a police station on campus, and they would actively drive around. And if you were walking around, especially with a backpack at night, they would have no problem stopping you, just for campus safety. And they always asked for your ID, looked in your eyes, tried to make sure that you weren't drinking. And they had no problem taking you to the station and making you take a breathalyzer test if they suspected that you were drinking underage. And that's something that you would get a massive fine for. It's very common for not just college students, but even a little bit older, for people to get in trouble for being drunk in public or something like underage drinking and have to spend a night asleep in a jail cell before they can be released and go home.
So to celebrate that, we're going to finish up our video the way we normally do, with a couple beers and just a couple classic two-boars sitting here in the park.
Yeah, because freedom. So to Denmark, skål.
Skål.